first year yet, but we have a long program to get through. Yeah, okay. So thank you very much. Hello again. Thank you very much to coming to our event on independent living services and the EU disability strategy. We are very happy that you're all here. I will start the introduction by presenting a quote which might, okay, another speaker has arrived. Hi, Esme, you can sit down over there. So yeah, I would like to start the introduction by presenting a quote which might seem a bit out of context at first. Yeah, so it said, the proposed council recommendation, it is based on Article 292 TFEU in combination with Article 153, which allows the Union to act with regard to the modernization of social protection systems. This is from the legal base of the EU care strategy. Next slide. Okay, then I would like to go through a few figures, some statistics. So it's usually assumed that we are on a good course when it comes to disability inclusion. However, the 2024 Eurofound report on independent living showed that depending on which source you use, institutionalization has either increased by 29% in the last decade or 14%, according to some academic papers. The thing is that none of these studies include group homes, so the real figure is probably much higher. And I think I don't need to point out all the negative results of institutionalization, which is exclusion from life, exposure to violence, and also reduction in life expectancy. Next slide, please. Okay. Then we have the disability employment gap, which has also increased from 18.6 to 24.5%. We have very high poverty rates of disabled people, substantially higher than the normal population, and also a high dependence on social transfers. It's of course good in a way that social transfers are mitigating the negative effects, but having to rely on social transfers is also not always a pleasant experience. Yeah, and of course, these figures, they have huge consequences for the individuals which are affected by them. But we would also like to talk more about the consequences for society because of the loss of life, but also of human capital. Many people, millions, prevented from contributing to society. And this is also a loss of talent, which hurts the competitiveness of economies. It presents an untapped potential to remedy shortages of workers. If this is news to you that there's potential, then this event is a good opportunity, I think. Then also the cost of the welfare state is to a certain extent not always caused by distribution of resources, but also by disability exclusion and the barriers. So why is this happening? There are many causes, but a cause we would like to highlight in our event is the insufficient access to independent living services, in particular personal assistance, which is the key one-on-one support by one or several support persons, and also personal budgets, which are the primary instrument to purchasing personal assistance, but also other services like household support and offer full choice and control that are paid to persons in cash or vouchers. There are huge problems when it comes to accessing these services. We see a huge fragmentation. Often there are small-scale projects or there's only availability in certain regions. For example, the person following budget exists in Flandern, but not in Wallonia. This is a typical pattern because it's not an established part of social security. And often these services are also not available to people in institutions or are restrictive in use. And of course, people, for example, cannot go to work or contribute to society without these services if there are needs. So we have a well-established system of institutions in every member state, which waste resources, but not of independent living services, and it needs to change. What do we need to do? We need to increase the availability to these services, which support independent living and also raise the quality. I purposefully chose the term independent living services and not community-based or person-centered services, because also in this event, we would like to highlight the stronger to the 18 pillars of independent living, which are much sharper defined also than community-based services. When it comes to this, we have a bit of a taboo in EU disability policy, which is to coordinate member state activity on provision of services like personal assistance or personal budgets. We had the Commission guidance to member states on independent living, which introduced a positive list on the right services, but it was limited to EU funds. And as the next step, with Enil asking for an initiative in the next EU disability strategy to also coordinate activities financed by national resources to improve access and quality. When it comes to this, there's often the no legal competence argument. But now, next slide, please. I would like to come back to the legal justification for the EU care strategy. Which is quoted before said that the modernization of social protection systems, there's competence for that. And the thing is that the care strategy didn't even really modernize social protection systems, but only presented recommendations on how to preserve the status quo. So a European strategy on personal assistance and personal budgets would be a hell of a measure for a true modernization of social protection systems, because it would represent a real change from systems that exclude and produce high costs to systems that guarantee choice and control and the demand-driven service provision. So in our event, we want to discuss the services which are needed and how they should be designed. We have many disabled people on the panel and in the audience, and very knowledgeable speakers from the Commission and national service providers. Probably there will be many questions in the end and opportunities to engage. And now I would like to give the floor after this introduction to the first speaker, which is the co-chair of the European Network on Independent Living, Nadia Haddad, who will talk about the 18 pillars of independent living. I give the floor to you, Nadia. Antonella, maybe you can help activate the microphone. And Kat will open the presentation, and then the presentation can start.
Thank you very much. So on behalf of my side, also welcome to all of you, those online and those who are present. And thank you also for the panelists to be here today. Florian already said the time. We can go to the next slide, please. Just the context where we are in, why it's so important for us to repeat again the same thing and to come up back with the 18 pillars, just to highlight the urge of an intersectional approach. So we saw that there was an increase of the number of people in residential care. there is still a lot of member states that they call now solidarity houses. They build in group, they build fancy, that they invite very fancy names for small group homes, and everybody find it okay. They are still also investing in, respite care because families get so overwhelmed and overcharged of providing for free support that they get so exhausted. So they park their children many times over there instead of investing in supporting their family and supporting the children within the normal context. And also, there is also a lot of uh, cuts on support services. For example, we saw that for years. We had that person following budgets in Flanders. Now there was a revision, and they will only finance handicap specific, they call it. So disabled specific care. What does this mean? If somebody's cleaning for me, then it's not disability specific. But if somebody's putting my coat and I explaining that it's different, then this act will be handicap specific. So it's completely out of context. It's not based on any emancipating factors or respecting our human rights because authorities are more and more having impact on our daily lives. So there are a lot of tweets. Also, they are reducing the number of hours of personal assistant in many countries, um, and there is change on eligibility. They are also, well, we saw that the Equal Treatment Directive was withdrawn and then it came back and then with other conditions. So many things are happening in the community that makes us a little bit afraid. There is no stability, and in many countries we are going backwards. So we urge now to start again and to remind ourselves and to remind everybody in the society and also especially policymakers that what is important for us. So we'll start again with the definition of independent living and what that really does mean. You can go to the next slide, please. So we'll use again Dr. Alaf Holzka's definition that said that independent living is having the same range of option and the same degree of self-determination taken for granted by no disabled. What does this conclude? It includes that opportunity to make choices and decision regarding where to live, with whom to live, how to live, and the way you are living. And it's just the right to be ordinary. And most of the time, we forgot about what it really means independent living. So, what are also, you can see on the next slide, please, Kat, the pillars of independent living, we also starting to forget about them more and more. And it's really that self-determination. We see a lot of new association, a lot of service providing, starting to speak on behalf of persons with disabilities, of bringing them as storytellers instead of emancipating them, and so that they can also be part of the solution and be also actors of social change, though, that they could have control over themselves, self-representation, choice and control as one block. Because in the majority of countries, they always said, yeah, but they can choose. Yeah, what can he choose in that small group home? The color of the t-shirt that he's wearing, the poster that he's hanging, he still doesn't have control on the services that they are supporting or giving them care. So it's also, it's one block. You can never choose without having control. And if one of them is leaking, then it's not independent living. And also the institutionalization, not only about institution, but also all other forms of segregation. It starts from special schools, it starts from sheltered workplaces, special guardianships, special uh, days for persons with disabilities where they are alone and not included and not mixed with other people of the society. So all those, sometimes it's a good initiative to make it visible, but it doesn't reflect reality. They should be included. They should be part of it. We are the biggest minority. We are the biggest minority in Europe, but still we are the less visible. So these things need to change. Can go to the next slide. Now we'll speak about the pillars of independent living. So we had done a lot of research and we ended up by saying having only one sector of life um, providing support or personal assistance is not enough. There must be a kind of holistic approach that support us to overcome all the barriers in life. So one of them um, is person assistant that we said, and Florian already said, the one-to-one, that you can choose who's assisting you, that you can have control over it, that you can change when you're not satisfied, that you can also regulate your daily program and change of it. You're not fixed or stuck to it. But you also need to have other areas of life because you can have the best assistant alive. If there is no accessibility in the area around you, the built environment, then still you cannot go in it. Your personal assistant will not be able to lift your whole flower up. So accessibility is something very important. Also, transport, public transport, and private transport, that you can take a cab when you come and you arrive, that is accessible. Also, the technical aids. For some people with speech impairments, they need to have facilities that would support them. Also, for people without speech impairments, technical aids for the moment are very crucial, especially with all the artificial intelligence that is coming up, all the services that become more and more digital, from banking to even reserve ticketing for your free time. All those technical aids, person with disability need to have support in it. They need also to have an extra budget to be able to buy them and to be trained, and also have persons, providers of assistive technologies who are trained in making them accessible. Screen readers for person with sight impairments, also person with intellectual disability, how they could have pictograms that facilitate the understanding of different websites and so on. One of the biggest and major problem also for independent living is housing. Access to affordable, accessible, available housing is very important. So it should not be that's also why people are still stuck in some institution, because they cannot find adequate housing and having personalized support at the same time. So they're obliged to go and have one package. So if we could go on the opposite way, providing them services that follows them in their own houses, it will help much more. Thank you. And then we spoke also already about inclusive education. So if a child is from young on included in regular at least schools and education, that is a win-win for both of them, not only for the child with a disability, but also for the child without a disability, so that they grow up together and they can go to the same neighborhood, and they become part of the same future community. And so education is very important because it's also it can facilitate to overcome the barrier of ending up in poverty once that you have a degree. Then we have also information. All different type of information that is available for the public should be accessible for persons with disabilities and should reach them. So there should be different type of formats of information. A decent income is crucial to be able to live independently, because without a decent income, if you don't have a decent income, you cannot go out. You cannot offer yourself, a decent life. So income is very important. You cannot offer housing. So you're obliged to go and co-house with others or share rooms with others because you cannot afford something else. And then the regular employment market, having access to it with all the reasonable accommodation that are needed, but also with the adaptation, the personalized adaptations that is needed. And these employment facilities should be also covered by the Ministry of Employment. It should not be part of your personalized budget, or it should not be part of another ministry. So each ministry should assume their responsibility and facilitate inclusion of persons with disabilities. And then also the right to be self-advocates, so to do advocacy. Many times persons with disability, when they start advocacy, they start on voluntary basis. So they cannot become professional if there is no support, financial and technical and human support for them to become advocates. And then we have peer support, which is also very crucial and important pillar of independent living. It's only by learning from stories of others that we can teach ourselves, that we can train ourselves and learn from how we could avoid mistakes or how we can do it by ourselves. And then we have access to healthcare and other facilities. Because, for example, somebody who's deaf and want to have an appointment in a hospital, it's still so difficult to find support for them to have access in it. But it should be available because they are citizens like all the others, and access to health is crucial and is a fundamental right. Then we have also many people are still under guardianship in Europe. So supported decision making should be a basic human right, and it should be already started from young off on. If a child is detected by having not being able to decide themselves, started with support groups, even if they are child, and support groups not with only adults, but with people who have the same age. So supported in the decision making should also be embedded in the legislation. And then we have, yeah, we should not forget about the independent living history and philosophy, because most of the time we forgot about it and we will want to try new things. But we can learn from what has happened in other, beforehand, and also where it went wrong to avoid this and bring everything back on track. And then the sexual and the reproductive rights that are mostly ignored because they think that persons with disability are asexual. And then legal aid to be able to go to justice and to litigate. And then digital technologies. And we should also not forget about the transition from one age to another age, and also for those who comes out from institutions. So transition can have multiple forms. So these are only 18, so it can also be more than this. But this is a minimum criteria, so it's a whole big matrix. And for that, if we want to realize independent living, so yeah, the policymakers should make up a kind of strategic plan that take all these areas minimum into account. And it can be personalized. Somebody else can have something else that he would add, and that must also be available. So we go into the next slide, and it's just that, so how can we work better on this? And is that we should again repeat that we have all a common understanding about independent living and what it means to bring people out of an institution and what it means having community-based services and all other support services that should be aligned with the CRPD. We should also repeat again that the transition should not be a never-ending story, because it's always starting by, we will start with small group homes, we will start with pilot projects. The majority of pilot projects end when the financing is ending. We see rarely that there is a taking over by the regional or by the local governments. So it's really about time that transition should be not transition, but it should be time binded with the technical and the finance and the human resources needed. And also the role of survivors of institutions is mostly ignored. It's rare to find them in the community and bring them and emancipate them to testimony on the effect of institution on it. And then also, last but not least, the role of user-led centers of independent living. Because if you look right now in Europe, we cannot say that every member state has a center of independent living that could facilitate it. So that should be really something that should be embedded in every country and every region, so that we have also segregated data and how that transition is really taking place or not, and that we could follow this up. And I will end over here because I think that my other panel speakers will definitely complete. Thank you.
So much. Thank you so much, Nadia. And I hand over straight away to the next speaker, which is Antonella Candiago, who's our policy officer and fighting with the microphone.
Okay, I can keep it for myself. Yeah.
Is it fine like that?
Exactly.
So we are routinely doing an independent living survey where we raise very interesting information, and Antonella is in charge of that and will explain more about our survey and what we found out.
Thank you. Okay, so I will present our indeed independent living survey 2024, disabled people's perceptions of independent living in Europe. Next slide, please. Okay, so you can explore the full findings and the country data from our INIL dedicated webpage, Independent Living Map. You will find the Independent Living Survey 2024 summary report, the detailed country sheets, and also the full data set. If we share the presentation, I also included the link to download the summary report directly. Next slide, please. So why this survey matters? Next. And next again. Thank you. Okay, so let's see what the purpose and the objectives of our survey are. First of all, assessing how disabled people perceive the state of independent living across Europe. But also provide detailed information and data on how the different European countries comply with the independent living pillars. The survey also serves to identify gaps as well as trends and good practices. And it can also be used to provide recommendations to countries and decision makers to improve areas where disabled people face challenges, ensuring equality and inclusion. Next slide, please. It's important to explain the methodology we adopted, so the scoring systems and the key indicators we used. Our survey collected responses from disabled individuals and disabled people's organizations, or DPOs, across all Europe. But rather than a scientific or statistical study, the survey wanted to capture the direct lived experiences and the perception of disabled people. That's also why the title of the survey focused on the perception. So what might be considered a kind of weakness for us, it's actually the strong point of our survey, because we really try to ask directly disabled people how they live and experience a society and inclusion. The participants scored each independent living pillar. And for each pillar, a checklist was provided containing different elements essential for the realization of independent living. This checklist was developed based on the extensive input from disabled people organizations, research and recommendations from our advocacy work, the United Nations Human Rights Office indicators on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and other academic resources. Next slide, please. The respondents were required to score each element between 1 and 5, with 1 meaning the right is not guaranteed at all, and 5, the right is fully guaranteed. When we sent out the survey, we also sent clear instructions about what this means. So if we take number 3 as example, the right is partially guaranteed. This means the right is recognized, for example, in law, and there are policies in place to support it, but the implementation is inconsistent. So there are gaps in enforcement that lead to a mixed experience of this right among the disabled population. So some disabled people can exercise the right to independent living, while others face significant barriers and challenges. And also this means there is some recourse available for rights violation, but this is very limited and not always effective. So through our scoring system, we try to take into account legal aspects, but also enforcement and implementation. Next slide, please. So as we mentioned, the survey is based on the independent living pillars. As Nadia explained, the pillars are preconditions for disabled people to live independently. I listed some of the key pillars, but I will not spend so much time as they were already explained. And also this is the previous list, while now Disabled People's Organization advocated and extended the list. Next slide, please. Here you can see the example of an independent living pillar and the checklist elements. I took as example communication support. So for each pillar, we try to explain what this means, where this right is established, and then a checklist with different elements, such as accessible communication, recognition of languages, training and availability of professionals, accessible technology and media, and so on. And under each pillar, we've always tried to include an element which is the we use to check if the horizontal principles are applied. This means all the policies and services under each pillar are co-produced with disabled people, take into account gender equality, and equally include all impairment groups. We also ask about the differences among the regions, as in many countries, the situation can differ according to region or municipalities, and also whether there are differences based on the type of impairment. Next slide, please. Let's see who participated, so the countries and respondents. I listed the 25 countries that responded to our survey, but the work is still in progress. So some countries are still missing, and we plan to extend the list and expand it. Next slide, please. I also try to list the types of organizations represented. It's good to see that the majority is indeed disabled people's organizations, and then we have centers for independent living. We have small percentages of user cooperative, individual disabled people, non-disabled people, but ally with the independent living movement, Equality Body Commission, disability studies, so research, university, and then international NGOs focusing in general on human rights, and other umbrella organizations focusing on disability rights. Next slide, please. Also, when it comes to the geographical scope of the survey, we really try to cover nationally. So, of course, we sent the survey to representative of each country, and then smaller percentage of international and also local and regional representations. Next slide, please. We also try to cover disabled people's organizations and experts with knowledge and expertise on different areas. We see some organizations focus on advocacy, others on personal assistance, social, political, and judicial participation, accessible environment. We really try to cover most of the independent living pillars. We can proceed now with the next slide and see some key findings, so what the data tells us. Next slide, please. Okay, so when it comes to the main trends and highlights from the 2024 results, we have the 25 countries listed with the total score. You can also check our website, where we are going to update the list. And we can proceed with the next slide. Okay, this is an example of a country sheet, and I would ask if you could please play the video. Yes. So beside finding the total scoring on our website, you can find the country assessment for each country. I included there the example of Greece. So you can see the overall score, in this case 1.8 out of 5, and the overall score for each independent living pillar. The video should proceed, I think, or maybe no. Anyways, after this main table, there is another table for communication, another table for peer support, and so on. So you can see all the elements of the checklist with the related scoring. I hope it's clear, even if we cannot see the video. Next slide, please. So we can see the main trends and highlights from the 2024 results. The survey results indicate that overall the scores remain very low, as even among the highest ranked countries, the scores remain below 3.5. And we recall the scale was between 1 and 5. So while some progress has been made, the general perception of disabled people is that independent living is not fully guaranteed in any European country. Next slide, please. Here we have the independent living map. We mostly see red countries. This means in those countries, the right is not guaranteed at all. And then we see some orange countries. This means the right is minimally guaranteed. We see a country which is yellow, and this means the right is partially guaranteed. And this is also the country scoring higher. And we don't see any green or darker green countries. This means the rights are not largely guaranteed or are not fully guaranteed anywhere, unfortunately. Next slide, please. So who is leading the way and who's falling behind? We listed here the top 3 scoring countries. So we have Iceland, the yellow country, with 3.2, Sweden with 2.9, and Malta 2.8 out of 5. And we also see the bottom 3 scoring countries. So the worst was France with 1.3, Spain with 1.5, and Montenegro with 1.7. If you can proceed with the next slides, we can quickly see the country assessment for Iceland with the overall score of 3.2 and the overall score for each independent living pillar. And in the following slide, we see the same for France with overall score of 1.3. Next slide, please. And next slide again, thanks. Okay, so some observations about the results. As mentioned, no country scored the maximum, which was 5. So independent living is not fully guaranteed anywhere in Europe. It's also important to highlight these scores reflect perceptions. So, for example, in countries already familiar with the concept of independent living, the expectations and standards are higher. And this led to more also critical assessments. While where independent living is still a new concept, but reforms are recent, sometimes scores may appear relatively higher due to some kind of optimism about the progress. In general, we see the Nordic countries, and we have the example of Iceland and Sweden, scored higher, reflecting strong welfare systems and established independent living frameworks. Malta shows also promising results, possibly due to recent reforms that were seen positively by the respondents. France and Spain continue to face institutional barriers, lack of effective personal assistance schemes, or some gaps in the implementation. And finally, Montenegro ranks low, as highlighting challenges linked to the limited infrastructure, the legal frameworks, and also the vulnerable economic conditions. Next slide, please. So from insight to action. Next slide. We can see now some implications of the results for our advocacy and policy work. First of all, center lived experience in policy making. This means the policies must be shaped by the real life experiences of disabled people and not just by legal frameworks. It's also important to strengthen the enforcement of rights, as even when there are good legislation, this is not enough. Mechanisms must ensure that the rights are realized in practice at local, national, and EU levels. Also support and expand the advocacy efforts. So continued and coordinated advocacy is needed to close the gap between policy and the effective lived reality. It's also important to raise awareness across these sectors. Next slide, please. Broader awareness of what independent living means. And this is very essential for policymakers, service providers, and also in general, the society and general public. Another recommendation is the importance of investing in community-based support, as already mentioned. So this means ensuring adequate, accessible, and person-directed services, such as personal assistance, but not only, that can enable the real choice and control of persons with disabilities. And finally, monitor progress beyond legal compliance. So progress must be measured through the direct experiences of disabled people and not just by the existence of policies or ratification of treaties. Next slide, please. The next steps. First of all, the first step will be to include the missing countries. So broaden the scope by engaging respondents from countries that were not covered in the latest round. Update the independent living map. So ensure the map reflects the most recent findings and data. And review and update the survey results annually. So establish this survey as a regular tool to monitor progress and trends when it comes to independent living in the European countries. And to conclude with the next slide, just thank you to all the respondents of the survey, INIL members, and all the individuals and organizations who contributed to the Independent Living Survey Insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Antonella, for this very clear presentation. And I hand over straight away to our next speaker, Esben Asmussen, who is Special Attaché at the Permanent Representation of Denmark to the EU, and will, well, present the perspective of the Danish presidency of the EU Council. Please, Esben, go ahead.
Now it's on? Yes. Yeah, thanks a lot for the invitation for today on this really important topic, and also for the very interesting presentation so far. I'm really happy to speak on this topic today because it has also been a quite big priority for the Danish presidency, specifically independent living. We have covered it in different activities both at the council we had last month, but also at conferences and through council conclusions. So it's a topic that we have really tried to get around, and also closer to the microphone. And we have also tried to. It's also like a personal priority for my minister to have a strong focus on this topic. So so it's a very it has really been something that we have tried to put focus on. Besides that of course it's an interest from my minister and so on. It's also, of course, also a very important topic. It's really important to ensure independent living, to secure the rights of persons with disabilities, and of course it's a very it's a crucial element in ensuring the human rights. As you also know, independent living is enshrined in Article 19 of the UNCRPD. This should be aware. Everyone here is aware about that. And progress has been made in the last few years on this, on realizing the right in Article 19. But as you also all know, we are far from being where we should be, and there is still major challenges. Self-reported discrimination is rising, and persons with disabilities face a higher risk of poverty and social exclusion. And the number of people living in institutions has not fallen significantly over the last decade. So these are the facts. These are the things we are working with. And of course, this should motivate us to act on this. Because on top of all of this that we are aware about, we also know that rights are under pressure globally. And in this context, it's really important that Europe acts and sets an example. And this is what we have tried to make a small contribution with. So the Danish presidency, we have now been working since July. So next month, we're already coming to an end. So I think this is a good time to try to highlight some of the things that we have tried to do to contribute to the conversation on independent living. And as I already mentioned, one of the things that we have been doing is that last month we have had a dedicated EBSCO council meeting for equality ministers, which has not been done many times before, but we wanted to create a forum where ministers who work with equality issues could come together and discuss issues. And this meeting, one half of the meeting was dedicated to disability issues. Also at this meeting, ministers adopted council conclusions on the social inclusion of persons with disability through the promotion of independent living. A long title, but we wanted to cover everything in the title. And these council conclusions should be seen as one part of the council's input to the second half of the EU disability strategy. So these council conclusions were adopted with unanimity between the member states, so all 27 member states behind it. And the message in these conclusions is also very clear. That is that independent living is not a nice to have, it's a right. And it's not only a right, it's also a precondition for many other rights, as well as the outcome that we would like to have when barriers are removed and the support is provided. The council conclusions also emphasize that independent living does not mean living without support, but that persons with disabilities receive the support they need to make their own choices, just like everyone else. And let me just highlight a few points from the conclusions and where the conclusions sort of put their emphasis. And these are things I've already heard also now in the first two interventions, so I'm happy about that. So first of all, the conclusions say that we need person-centered community services So that means both personal assistance, supported decision-making, and strong support networks. Secondly, we must ensure affordable assistive technology and accessible information and communication services. Third, we must remove barriers that prevent persons with disabilities from accessing mainstream services, such as healthcare, education, employment, and leisure activities. And fourth, and this is an important one, we should ensure affordable, accessible, and non-segregated housing. I would like to stress this one because this is also one of the points that my minister has also in a recent interview pointed out, that she sees a strong link between housing and independent living, and that these two elements can indeed not be separated. Meaning that independent living cannot be achieved without the right housing conditions. And housing in general is a whole other topic that has also been a really big on our agenda, and we have really done our best to also link those two topics. Fifth, we must recognize the crucial role of both professional and informal carers. So carers need better working conditions, and the care sector needs to become more attractive. So this is also something we specifically highlight in the council conclusions. Finally, the conclusions also have a few asks for the Commission. And let me just highlight three. First of all, and I think this is the very reason why we have the council conclusions, is that we would like independent living to be at the center of initiatives in the second half of the strategy. As I already mentioned, of course, this is a very central purpose of the conclusions. Secondly, we should actively involve persons with disabilities and their representative organizations. So it's clear that the expertise and the experience that these organizations can bring is indispensable for advancing independent living. And third, we should promote systematic disability mainstreaming by integrating disability inclusive measures and accessibility into key EU strategies. And here we are actually talking about the whole range of strategies that have already been presented by the Commission, but also upcoming ones. And I think some of the obvious candidates are, of course, the housing strategy that is coming later this year, but also strategies that have been presented, like the Preparedness Union strategy and so on. So we have also highlighted this in the conclusions. So now the Danish presidency is preparing to hand over to the next presidency of Cyprus, and I think we can do so with quite some confidence and some hope. Confidence and hope that these conclusions provide a strong contribution in this area, and in our shared efforts to advance and to make sure that all persons with disability can live independently and participate in society. So I look forward to all the other contributions today and for the continued discussion. And thanks a lot again.
Yeah, thank you, Esben. Thank you so much for coming and for your contributions. Yes, this council conclusions, we are very happy that they came. Just so you're aware, there will be time for questions and statements from your part, from the participants' part at the end. But let's get through the speakers first. So yeah, we very much support the idea of a Commission initiative on independent living in the disability strategy. And let us propose two important topics or services you can then, you can then work with in this initiative. At first is personal budget schemes. For this, we have invited a disability activist and personal budget holder, Christian Bayerlein, who will make some interesting remarks on this. Now we are using the webinar well, format with Zoom.
You hear me?
Yes, we hear you, Christian.
Yeah,
I
that's
can-
good. Unfortunately, I can't share any video right now, and also not a presentation. We spoke about that before, and I think you will share the video from me later on. But I will give them a short introduction about me first. I'm Christian Bayerlein. I'm a disabled person living with spinal muscular atrophy from birth, and I'm using an electrical wheelchair and employing personal assistants of my own in the personal budget as an employer model. And my background is twofold. Actually, I'm a computer scientist, and I work for the Federal Archives in Germany in the IT department. That's my main day-to-day living. And I'm also a free, independent activist on disabled people rights. Especially I focus on accessibility and inclusion in the field of technology. So I do a lot of AI consulting and also other technologies, assistive technologies. Another field is sexuality and disability. And of course, personal budget, personal assistance, and independent living. And that's why I'm here. Um, yeah, I have to say a lot about what was mentioned before. Uh, but I will start. I have written together a script and made a explainer video. I did that with AI, but the content is written by myself. So I want to emphasize that this is not AI stuff. This is a real human-made content. But I think it's easier to digest that way, and I think it's a very good explainer video about what it means to live with personal assistance and personal budget from a first-hand experience. So Florian, if you can start the video, that would be nice.
We will start it in a moment. We're working on it.
When they're done right, okay, so my message here is pretty simple. I want to talk about personal budgets, but maybe not in the way you're used to thinking about them. See, these aren't just some small tweak to the welfare system. No. When they're done right, they're literally the infrastructure for freedom. They take rights that are just words on a page and turn them into real, actual control over your own life. So to really get this, we have to start with the right itself. You know, right across the EU, independent living is considered a fundamental right. This isn't just some luxury add-on. It's not a nice to have. It's a major goal of the EU's whole strategy on disability rights, and it's backed by the UN Convention. The promise, the big idea, is that every person should be able to choose where they live and who they live with. Simple as that. But, and this is the big but, here's the problem we're going to dig into. We have this really strong promise at the policy level, right? But what's actually happening on the ground for people? Well, it often falls painfully short. And on paper, I mean, the foundation looks really solid. The EU strategy for this decade is super clear. And just this year, 2024, the Commission came out with detailed guidance that spells it all out. It says, fund services in the community, use EU money to help people leave institutions, and, this is key, make sure the support is actually controlled by the individual. So yeah, the policy is there. And yet, that official promise, it smacks right into a pretty sobering reality. When you look at the latest data, you see a completely different picture. I mean, just look at this. It really hammers home the size of the gap. A recent survey by the European Network on Independent Living, that's ENIL, they scored countries on how well they actually guarantee this right. A perfect score, the goal, is a 5.0. And as you can see, nobody gets there, not even close. The best is Iceland with a 3.2. And then you have countries like France, way down at 1.3. It's so clear that what's written down in policy is just not translating into real everyday choice. So the big question is, how do we close this gap? Well, the most powerful tool we have by far is the personal budget. But here's the catch. It has to be designed the right way. So let's walk through the 7 core principles that really make them work, that turn them into that infrastructure for freedom I was talking about. Okay, first up, choice and control. This is absolutely non-negotiable. It means the person themselves decides who supports them, when, where, and how. Second, the budget has to follow a real life. It can't be stuck in bureaucratic boxes. It has to cover everything: home, work, study, culture, travel, the whole shebang. Third, you have to build these systems with disabled people's organizations right from the very start. And fourth, and this one is crucial for the user, it has to feel like one single budget, even if behind the scenes, the money is coming from a bunch of different pots. All right, we're not done. Number 5, the money has to be adequate. The rates have to cover the full cost of being a good employer. That means proper wages, insurance, training, all of it. Because if you don't, you just can't find or keep good people. Simple. 6th, portability. The budget has to be able to move with you if you want to work or study somewhere else. And finally, number 7, accountability needs a total rethink. It should be light touch, focused on outcomes. The main question should be, am I getting to live the life I want to live, not drowning people in mistrustful paperwork? Okay, so all these principles might sound a bit abstract. To make them really concrete, I want to share how this all actually works for me. This is my personal experience, my system in Koblenz, Germany. And I really want to be clear about this. What I'm about to show you, this isn't some theory slide. It's not a policy proposal. This is my daily life. These are the logistics that take that right to independent living and make it real. Make it a part of my everyday. So I use what's called an employer model. What does that mean? It means I'm the boss. I directly hire, train, and manage my own team of assistants, usually around 9 or 10 people. Now, the real key to my system is the shift structure. They work in 24-hour block shifts, sometimes for a few days in a row. And let me tell you, this is an absolute game changer. It means fewer handovers, which means less stress and fewer mistakes. It gives me continuity, and most importantly, it's what makes it possible for me to travel for work, to go to conferences, to actually live a dynamic life. So, you're probably wondering where the money comes from. Well, behind the scenes, my budget is basically a puzzle pieced together from a bunch of different sources. You've got social services, care insurance, health insurance, employment assistance. It's complicated. But, and this is the magic of a good system, for me as the user, it feels like it all comes from one place. It's delivered as if from one hand. I get one single integrated plan with one clear agreement. I don't have to deal with all that back-end complexity. So if we want to take this kind of success and replicate it anywhere else, it really comes down to 3 essential features. First, you need a lead agency that creates a single front door for the person, no running around to 10 different offices. Second, there has to be a guaranteed legal option to be the employer, so you can have maximum control. And third, the funding rates have to cover the full cost. It's the only way to recruit and, just as importantly, retain a stable, high-quality team. Okay, so we've seen how it can work on a personal level. Now, how do we take these lessons and scale them up across the entire EU? How do we make this the standard, not the exception? Well, here are 5 concrete levers that the EU can pull right now to make that happen. All right, here they are. First, make personal budgets the default gateway to all independent living support. It should be the standard way in. Second, establish some EU-level minimum criteria for how these budgets are designed so we don't have fake versions. Third, let's build a real budget passport, maybe piggybacking on the new EU disability card so your support can travel with you. Fourth, align all EU funding. That means no more EU money for institutions, period. All of it should go to community-based services. And fifth, we need to track progress. Let's create an annual scoreboard developed with disabled people's organizations to see which countries are actually moving forward and which ones are lagging behind. So, all of this brings me to my final and I think most important point. This is a direct call to action. It's for everyone who has a hand in turning these rights from paper promises into a lived reality. So, for the member states and EU Commission, my ask is really, really clear. Make that lead agency single front door model mandatory. Guarantee the employer model in law. Set the funding rates to cover the full employer cost. Start building that personal budget passport now. And for the last time, no new EU money for institutions. Just stop. Look, this is the choice that's in front of us. It's a choice between two futures. The old way? That's institutions, it's bureaucracy, it's funding trapped in silos, it's your life being dictated by an agency's timetable. The new way? The rights-based way? That's living in the community. It's focusing on outcomes. It's having one single budget, and it's having support that actually follows the rhythm of your life. So I'm going to leave you with a simple litmus test to know if any support system is actually any good. Just ask these 3 questions. Number 1, can I change my assistant tomorrow if I need to without having to ask for permission? Number 2, can I plan a 3-day work trip for next week without going through a whole new assessment? And maybe the most telling question of all, is this system so good, so logical, so respectful that you would actually use it yourself? That is the standard we need to be aiming for, nothing less.
This presentation was a bit helpful. I have 2 few points to add on this. For example, you had mentioned this questionnaire where you rated the attractiveness of personal budgets and personal assistance and independent living in the different countries. I had this questionnaire too, and I must admit I didn't fill it out because I felt that I even can't tell you how far it is, because, for example, in our legislative framework, we don't even have the terms independent living and personal assistance. It's all around different pillars of the social welfare system. For example, we have personal care, which was actually initially meant for elderly people originally, and we have the right to participate in the society and in work life, which is a different pillar. And so we have different pillars depending on the actual basis of the need, but we don't have one overall spanning a definition of personal assistance as such. So you could say that the right to personal assistance is not really guaranteed, but in day-to-day life, for some people it works. And also for the one-hand principle, which I mentioned in the presentation, it sounds easier than it actually is, because the foundation is still based on these different pillars, and the different pillars have different criteria which have to be fulfilled to be eligible to get that benefit. For example, most of the assistance is called Eingliederungshilfe in Germany, which is means tested. So you have to be poor to be eligible to get that support. And this is one of the pain points, I would say, that in Germany it's very complicated system. We made it a bit easier by putting this personal budget scheme on top of that, but still it's not a perfect law. So I would advise and I would consult to make it very easy for the people to apply for personal assistance. Okay, so far from my side, and I will hand over back to Florian to lead on the discussion.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
Christian, many thanks for your contribution.
Okay.
I was just asked, can we share the link to the video afterwards?
Hey, Flaffen. Yes, of course. I will send it to public. Anyway, I wanted to wait until after the presentation and after the workshop and not public make it publicly available before that. But after we finish, I will set the video to public and it's indexed then, so everybody who's interested can find it.
Okay, Christian, great. Thank you so much. And now,
Wow. Last thing.
sorry. Okay. Okay, we move on to the next speaker. We have the example of a country who is undertaking a personal assistance reform, and as we saw, it already improved the reputation of the provision of disability services. We have here who came all the way from Malta, Aquilina Maria Teresa, who works for the National Agency for the Provision of Services to Persons with Disabilities of the Republic of Malta, who will tell us more about their personal assistance reform. And yeah, I hand over.
Good afternoon, everyone. For over 16 years, I've worked in the disability sector, focusing on service development, policy implementation, and ensuring that persons with disability have access to dignified, inclusive support systems. My career has been driven by one core belief: independence is not about living alone, but it's about empowerment and choice. So today I'm here to share Malta's journey in reforming personal assistance services, a reform that reflects these beliefs and aligns with international principles of inclusion. Imagine waking up tomorrow and suddenly needing help for the simplest things: getting dressed, making breakfast, commuting to work. Now imagine you have no choice in who helps you or how they help you. How would that feel? This is the reality for many individuals with disabilities. In order to mitigate this issue, Malta embarked on one of the most significant reforms in disability services in its history, a transformation that goes beyond policy and touches the very way persons with disability experience independence and choice. This personal assistance reform is not just an adjustment, it's a complete redesign of the system's framework, from national legislation to the way individuals navigate and access services. It's about creating a model that respects autonomy and flexibility. Malta will work towards introducing personal budgets by 2030, a milestone that will empower persons with disabilities to manage their own support. This also aligns perfectly with the principles of independent living outlined in 2021-2030 National Strategy on the Rights of Disabled Persons. This reform also positions Malta as a leader in aligning with international standards, specifically UNCRPD Article 19 and its General Comment Number 5, and the guidelines on DI. These frameworks call for choice, control, and community-based living, and Malta is definitely answering that call. Today, we stand at a pivotal moment in the journey towards an inclusive society, one where persons with disability are not only supported, but truly empowered to live independently, with dignity and choice. Our mission is clear: to transform disability-related services and processes so they reflect respect, autonomy, and flexibility. For too long, traditional systems have focused on institutional care, limiting opportunities for individuals to exercise control over their life. This reform is about changing that narrative. It's about enabling persons with disability to make rightful and respectful choices. Choices about where they live, how they live, and support they receive. We are introducing a self-directed model that places the individual at the center. This includes the implementation of personal budgets, giving people the flexibility to manage their own support, whether it's personal assistance, access to services, tools, or equipment that contribute to independent living throughout their lives. This is not just a policy change, it's a cultural shift. By embracing personal autonomy and flexibility, we are fostering an inclusive society, one where every person can thrive. We're moving from a system of dependency to one of empowerment. Sure. It's not. No worries. Next slide, please. This reform is not a solo effort. It involves persons with disability, CRPD, DDI, independent organizations, personal assistants, and professionals. Collaboration ensures that the reform is grounded in real-world experiences. Next slide. This reform will target youth and adults with disabilities and will be funded via national funds. This slide shows the key stages of Malta's personal assistance reform. It's a phased approach designed to assure sustainability and inclusivity. We began in 2023 with the groundwork, meeting stakeholders, planning the reform, and conducting public consultations. This was followed by reviewing feedback and setting up consultative committees. In 2024, we moved into design and legislative work. This included creating a user's charter of rights and responsibility, drafting a generic job description for personal assistance, and preparing national legislation related to personal assistance. We also continue stakeholder engagement and start progressive implementation. Beyond 2024, the focus shifts to refining design stages, introducing new policies, and ensuring stakeholders' coordination. This is where we consolidate the system and prepare for the final milestone. By 2030, our ultimate objective is the introduction of personal budgets, giving individuals full control over their support services. Next slide, please. This reform is not just about changing processes, it's about innovation. At its core, it strongly embraces the principles of self-directed support. What does that mean? It means giving individuals the power to decide how their assistance is structured, so they can live independently and be part of inclusive communities. With this approach, persons with disability can access every aspect of life, from tertiary education and employment to family life and leisure, on their own terms. Independence becomes practical, not theoretical, because the right support is available when and how it's needed. Next slide, please. Evaluation. Next slide. Evaluation is a cornerstone of this reform. We don't just design policies, we listen, we learn, and we adapt. Feedback comes from three critical sources. First, from persons with disabilities themselves. Their lived experience of services are our most valuable guide. Second, from staff members and the support networks of service users. These perspectives help us to understand practical challenges and opportunities. And third but not least, from partners and stakeholders, including the Commission for the Rights of Persons with Disability, the Directorate for Disability Issues, and civil society organizations. Their input ensured that our approach is inclusive and aligned with international best practices. Next slide, please. As I conclude this presentation, I want to bring the focus back to what really matters, the people at the heart of this reform. Policies and frameworks are important, but they only have meaning when they translate into real impact for individuals. In this slide, we're seeing Malek, who is one service user who receives personal assistance that supports him in education. Malek describes this assistance as my education journey was greatly aided by the scheme, as without my personal assistance, I could not have achieved half of what I did. Next slide. We have also Maria. Maria uses personal assistance to support her into her daily life. She describes this as once you have personal assistance, it is life-changing as you achieve independence. This is very encouraging. Malek, in fact, says personal assistance made his education possible. Maria calls it life-changing. These stories show why this reform matters. It's about dignity, autonomy, and giving opportunity. Next slide, please. As we look ahead, the way forward for personal assistance in Malta is clear. We are transitioning towards a personal budget system. This means moving beyond a one-size-fits-all approach where support is limited to personal assistance and instead creating a flexible model that truly reflects individuals' needs. Under this new system, persons with disabilities will have the autonomy to access subsidies in line with what they require, whether that's personal assistance, assistive technology, or other forms of support that enable independent living. This shift is about empowerment, choice, and inclusion. It ensures that resources are allocated based on personal circumstances, not predefined categories. Ultimately, our goal is to build a system that respects individuality and promotes full participation in all aspects of life, ranging from education, employment, family, and leisure. Next slide. Thank you for your attention. As we move forward, our commitment remains clear. That is that to create a system that empowers individuals, respects choice, and promotes inclusion. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you, Maria Teresa, for your contribution. I can say that we are very happy that there are countries who are undertaking also rolling out like nationwide schemes and not just doing small scale projects or pilot projects. Okay. The next speaker now is for the European Commission to react to what has been heard, the problems that have been raised, the preferences of what is needed. So I give the floor to Lucy Davoin, who is head of disability of the Disability Unit in the Directorate General for Justice and Consumers. So, Lucy, what is the Commission going to do about all of this? No pressure.
No pressure.
Sorry.
Thank you, Florian, for inviting us to this event, and really congratulations for the organization of this seminar, which I think is not only very interesting but also very timely from the point of view of the Commission. So as you know, we are somehow halfway through the implementation of the strategy for the rights of persons with disability, which was adopted in 2021 and which runs until 2030. And we plan to somehow reflect on the progress achieved, what works, what didn't work well, and to, if needed and as needed, propose new action. So you have seen the Commission work program for 2026. There is a communication foreseen for the second quarter of 2026 on the strategy for the rights of persons with disability to enhance, update this strategy. And in this context, we really count on all of you to help us, to give us your feedback. We have already started with some, let's say, targeted consultation within the disability platform, where both member states and civil society are present with social partners earlier this week, and also with other civil society organizations later in December. But we also last Friday published an open public consultation and a call for evidence. And this is really a call for all of you to provide your input, your ideas for what we call sometimes the second phase of a strategy. But before moving on to what we could do in the future, let me maybe highlight some of the achievements of this period. First, I mean, not at the European level, but I can see that at national level, there is really an appetite to move forward, to try to implement the Article 19. We've seen the effort of Danish presidency and the involvement of the ministers in EBSCO, so in the council last month. We see example from Malta, from Ireland. Really, there is appetite to move forward. At European level, I think we have done our best, and we've tried to really do our best, use all the tools available to promote independent living. So to promote the condition for persons with disability to live independently. And as it was said, to decide where, with whom, how they want to live, what has been called self-determination in other presentation. What we have done, first, it's quite an achievement. We have horizontal, what we call horizontal enabling condition in the current funding period, so that funding, the EU funds are compliant with the UNCRPD. The notice guidance, it was mentioned as a milestone, as a step forward. And I think it echoes some of the idea you already mentioned during this seminar. For instance, at the beginning of the notice, we clearly say that any investments or EU funding in the area of independent living should be underpinned by a clear strategy with a monitoring, with an analysis of the gaps in terms of funding, with clear targets on the way forward, so that indeed, as it was said, it's not an endless transition, but we really make progress, and also so that we somehow move away from small-scale projects because we are beyond that. So we are really in the notice inviting member states to develop fully fledged policy on this area. And we have a series of building block, what we call building block in the notice, which in a way echo some of the pillars, or many of the pillars that Enil is proposing as a basis for independent living. One of the key concepts is person-centered, what we call person-centered service. It looks like a buzzword, but actually what we put in the notice is very concrete. It's personal budget assistance, personal assistance, it's personal budget as well. So these two tools, which are important, and research shows they are important, they are already in our notice. We have also other building blocks that were also mentioned by different person, and notably breaking the barriers in the community. This means that transport, work, environment should be accessible so that person can live independently, autonomously. Housing as well should be accessible. So I think, to conclude, I think the notice is a very is a powerful instrument, and somehow echoes already some of the demands of the disability movement. And we have been busy this year, because I think it was adopted a couple of recently, so it's the 1 year anniversary of our notice. We have been busy outreach, so being sure that the notice is disseminated, is used. It's also a very practical tool with a self-assessment tool, so that managing authorities, for instance, in the member states, could also use it. Having said that, there is no reason to be complacent, and this has been said by many stakeholders. The figures, for instance, are quite sobering. I mean, when you look at the employment rate of the disability employment gap, which is one of the key indicators in the social scoreboard, the situation has not changed. The gaps between person with and without disabilities has not changed over a couple of years. When you look at indicators on independent living, so we don't have, for the time being, a monitoring through Eurostat, but we have a good work that has been quoted there from the Eurofund, from the Agency for the Quality of Life, which shows that trends in terms of deinstitutionalization are not really encouraging at all, and quite the contrary. The number of persons in institution has increased in some member states. So this is obviously a source of concern. You know also that beyond Eurofund, the FRA agency, the Agency for Fundamental Rights, is working on violence in institution and should publish soon its report on the topic. So the statistics are not are not at all encouraging, despite the progress, despite the policy effort, at national level and at European level. So we need to work somehow to do better within the limits at EU level, within the limits of the powers conferred by the treaty. So in the field of social protection, social services, the article of the treaties that were mentioned at the beginning of this seminar are indeed the articles on which we should base any action in this field. In the past, we have used other articles to progress in terms of accessibility, in terms of employment. So voila, we have some power, we have some tools. So the idea is really to make the best use of them and see how we best support the member states to develop a fully fledged policy on independent living. There have been a number of ideas put forward in this seminar. I have noted them down. Voilà, I cannot say more at this stage because we are really for the coming month in, let's say, listening mode, digesting the ideas. But you know, I can reassure you that there will be an update of the strategy. The idea so far is to keep the structure of the current strategy, because we tend to think that the priorities that were put forward in 2021 remains largely relevant for the next years. And as you know, one of the key priorities of the strategy is independent living. So voila. I didn't at all reply to the question I was asked at the beginning of my intervention. So what the Commission will do, because I cannot at this stage. We are more in consultation, in a hearing, listening mode for the time being. But I can reassure you that we are committed to uphold the rights of the persons with disabilities and to fully implement the UN CRPD. It is indeed in the mission letter of Commissioner Labib. Voilà.
Thank you, Lucy. I admit my question was not entirely serious, so it's okay. Yeah, now we have a lot of time left for questions from the audience, or you can also make statements. We really left a lot of time on purpose. So it's interactive, and you have a chance. I mean, you have the European Commission here. You have two representatives of a member state government, of a service provider. So it's a good opportunity also for you to tell us also which services do you need, or which services are you missing. Also, you can comment on your personal situation, barriers, which services would be needed. Do you have personal assistance, personal budget? You don't have it. Is this what you need? Do you need something else? I would say we take, let's say 2 questions and go to the audience, and then go take 2 questions for the audience, go to the panel, and then back to the audience. Maybe we have quite a lot of participants online, actually. Right now 55, we were up to 62 for a moment. Maybe because you are the largest group online. Are there questions? Yes. Also. Yes, I can almost read them. Okay, maybe let's start at the top. We take 1 question here, then 1 from the audience in the room. From Cesar Jimenez for later. The strategy's first years have been positive in laying out the basis of what can be expected. In the second half of the strategy, could the expectations be raised, be met passing the proper legislation? Okay, I'm not sure I entirely understand the question. Yeah, Cesar, can you maybe clarify a little bit what you mean? We give you a moment to type from the audience in the room. Are there questions or also Heta, Puki? Yeah, you can present yourself. Yeah, that's a really good point.
So I'm Heta Puki. I'm the president of a European NGO, the European Council of Autistic People. And I want to bring up the specific question of autistic people again, although I've done this in disability platform meetings, for example, but we feel this is really a burning and urgent issue. So while the situation overall is not very good, we are hoping that we could come to the same level with the others. To begin to reach the same level with other groups of people with disabilities, we would need the European Disability Strategy implementation to take into account the resolution published in 2023 by the European Parliament on harmonizing the rights of autistic people. This has not yet happened, and I suspect the same is true for many of the people we think of as neurodivergent, who are considered to have psychosocial or neurodevelopmental disabilities, although the picture is often more complex than that. But we as autistic people tend to have at least some voice. Many of these groups don't. So the question for us is how to even begin to get recognition that many of us do have disabilities and are in need of services to allow us to live independently. We're still often commonly denied access to diagnostic services or expert assessment of functioning. And even when people get these, it doesn't mean that the person is automatically recognized as having a disability or being eligible for the services. We get percentages assigned to vision or hearing loss, for example, but we don't get a percentage saying so many percent autistic. This applies to me personally, for example. I have a percentage for my vision loss, not for my autism. It's much harder to argue for our rights. So concerning the survey, for example, wonderful, necessary work, but I'm concerned that autistic people may not have been reached because they lack diagnosis and disability status and will not answer the survey, because they don't realize that these matters concern them and that they should have these rights. They take it as natural and as inevitable that their parents, for example, are their unpaid supporters and assistants. They are anxious about responding to surveys because of the nature of the disability. They have communication differences that cause them to struggle with questions and give up before submitting their answer, because they need support to even participate in surveys. So I'm wondering if this has been addressed, or can you think of ways of addressing this? And thinking of the Danish presidency, you said you will involve the organizations of people with disabilities. How would you address Eastern Europe, where autistic people don't have diagnosis because they deny adult autism exists and they cannot form organizations? No. So personal budgets, just as a comment, I am all for it. It would be such a relief. It would be such a sense of freedom if I'm one of the few who do get personal assistance. But just being here, I am told that I cannot have personal assistance for this trip because I must fit into a mold. I must be average by the rules of Finland. I can only have assistance for 2 weeks abroad per year because that's the average holiday a person takes, and my international advocacy and my paid work in international projects does not meet their criteria. So I sacrifice some safety and dignity to be there. And it really worries me that we can't have more autistic people here because they are in these situations. They either have no assistance at all or they face these same problems. Yeah. Sorry, I go on a bit. We do have a lot of unsolved issues.
Thank you so much, Heta. Okay, Cesar, did he? Clarification. Okay, then I move on to Katrin Woods. Are the scores in line, so it refers to the independent living survey, are the scores in line with what you would have guessed on beforehand? Okay, I will, any looking around the panelists, do you, well, the question from Katrin is more for Antonella, probably, I would say, or also for Nadia. Do any of the panelists wish to comment on what Heta said? Maybe that first, and then we move on to the question. So, yeah, maybe first comment on what Heta said, and then we move on to the question on the survey. So Heta raised a lot of interesting points, like disability assessments, for example. I sometimes hear that people don't ask for help, but that is not entirely true. Many disability assessments are still very medical. So you're not assessed in terms of barriers, but if you have the right condition to qualify, that excludes many people. Yeah, and we always say that independent living services should be for people of all impairments. Yeah. Can we, what is the Maltese personal assistance reform, for example? Is this for people of all impairments? How are you doing the assessments? And also what will the Commission take this into consideration? Yeah, please, who would like to say something?
Personal assistance is for, sure, it's on. Personal assistance is for everyone. There isn't any criteria in order to be able to have and receive personal assistance. The most important thing is that you have the access to the right level of support and choice. That's all that makes the difference. So whenever there is a service user who needs to access personal assistance from our end, we do a very detailed assessment that clarifies and outlines what type of personal assistance the person requires and also on which basis. But definitely it's the service user, the individual with disability per se, that needs to decide. But the most important thing is that we always keep in mind that there is no one size fits all. So it needs to be tailor-made according to the needs of the individual person.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Teresa. Any of the other panelists would like to come in? Nadia and Antonella, you can too, of course. Huh? Yeah. Everybody.
Thanks.
Maybe I can also say something to the assessment. The hostage, yes, that's very complicated. And it depends very much on which services and which benefits you apply for. As I said already, there are several pillars in the system, and depending on which pillars you apply for, you have different assessments you have to go through. So when you have a medical need, you have medical assessment. You also have to include a doctor and general medicine, and for the social welfare, for the integration help, Eingliederungshilfe, you have a assessment which is more like the social model, but not entirely. So there are also medical parts of it, and that makes it, that's one of the points which makes it very complicated.
Okay, thanks, Christian. I think, Lucy, you wanted to.
Yes, on the issue of disability assessment, which was rightly pointed out as an important issue and somehow the basis for any other type of support. We tend to consider that it remains, I mean, it is so far a competence still of the member states, disability assessment scheme. Nevertheless, as you know, the European Disability Card is a form of mutual recognition across Europe of disability assessment, so that is very certainty for the person with disabilities when moving in another member state for short stay to be able to benefit from preferential condition and preferential condition and treatment. And in this context, I think because also of this development, member states have expressed a form of interest to exchange good practices on the issue of disability assessments. My feeling somehow is that many of them are struggling to develop and to move away from a medical assessment to a human rights-based assessment. Many of them do receive recommendation during the constructive dialogue with the UN committee. So that's why they are also asking for some form of support, even if it's at European level. It can be a study, it can be exchange of good practices, because it remains mostly a competence of member states. But I wanted just to pass on the message that this is not the first time indeed that the issue of disability assessment has been raised during our consultation. And I can understand that it remains somehow a key issue at the basis of any further progress. So voilà, I wanted to tell you that we are aware of the problems, and that member states also have raised ideas in this area, so that we can all make progress.
Then we had the question from Katrin, if we guessed about the scores, we expected that.
Just first, we also wanted to say also when sending out the survey, we asked people if they needed some kind of support to fill in the survey. So we offered the possibility to assist online. We also did it in person for members in process. And for the second question, if we expected the results, correct? Okay. I will say in part yes and in part no, as we already knew we're not doing great in terms of independent living and disability rights. But I also think it was still very disappointing and sad to see even the best country was scoring around 3 out of 5. So this made me reflect, I think, not only on how much we still have to fight for, but also how much we are basically in every European country, we're still so much forced to adapt to inaccessibility and lack of inclusion. And this is, of course, not a good thing. I think there's a big impact also on mental health of disabled people and activists. So maybe you want to say.
I just want to complete that even some member states used the outcomes of the survey against us, saying as the result doesn't give any green country, independent living is not possible. Instead of having a multi-sectoral approach, yes, it's really used even in some service providers, because there was no political engagement. There was still not that paradigm shift. People still doesn't understand. That's why it's really important that we repeat every time what we mean about independent living. And that's just to be ordinary like everybody else. And then when you say it, but you can have all an engagement, you ratify the convention, there are obligations under this. So you are violating human rights because it's in your mindset, not possible for all, or it's only for wheelchair users, or it's only for those who have these and these capacities. So it's really about, again, paradigm shifts, awareness wearing, and repeating ourselves. I also want to come back on the assessment. I know that the European Disability Forum had a human rights report some years ago about all the type of assessment. There was not, and also Anna, the previous academic network on expert on disability. There was not one country where the assessment is done with persons with disabilities themselves. So there was always a medical report linked to it. So it's still always medicalized. It's not on, they have, some countries are progressive and they assess about the functionality outside the home context, but it's still linked very medical. What we aimed for within ENIL and with Grip, one of the members of ENIL here in Belgium, they said we should do a mirror. We should take a person from a certain age and compare it to a young guy from 21 years old and compare it to a guy from 20 years old who has not a disability, and then see what is missing as support, and then assess due to that. And having also within the assessment procedure, most of the time there is a multidisciplinary team, we need to have persons with disability themselves being part of it. And it should be also age relative, so that it can change and take into consideration, the personal needs depending on the phase of life of persons. So that's also, again, something that we all need to re-advocate for it.
These were some very good points. And I saw Cesar, he has reformulated his question a bit. This is always a good question. Can we expect binding legislation, or to which extent? Really, are we more with guidance and notices? We know they are very important steps, but yeah. So what about legislation?
I think the notice guidance, so technically it's a communication, no? So not binding. It covers many areas, and in some areas, like accessibility, there has been legislation passed using internal market legal basis. In the field of employment, we also have directive in other areas like social protection, like social services. It's more difficult to have a directive, and so far the Commission has been using other type of instruments, mostly council recommendation, to advance in this area. So, for instance, I was actually before joining the disability unit, I have been working on a council recommendation on access to social protection for atypical workers and self-employed persons. I know my colleagues have worked on recommendation on childcare, for instance. So in some areas, I think it's the avenue of a recommendation seems more fruitful. Also taking into account the fact that the so-called Equal Treatment Directive, which cover fields of discrimination like education and social protection, has been blocked for many years. So voila, I think you know the rules yourself. I don't need to be more explicit about that. So I think it's important to have in mind all the tools that we can use at European level.
Yep. Thank you, Lucy. We had two questions from the digital participants now. I would like to hand back to the in-person audience. Are there more questions or remarks? Would anybody like to make a statement? No? Yes? Okay.
Let's see. Okay, yeah. My name is Ebba, and I come from the organization Inclusion Europe. So we work specifically with rights for people with intellectual disabilities. I try to formulate this as a question, but maybe it's more of a remark. I would like to focus on the importance of support the decision making when it comes to people with intellectual disabilities. Because for this group, in order to make independent living actually work in practice, it's so important that you can actually get support to make your own decisions. And moving away from systems of guardianships, for example, where the guardian would be the person in charge of your personal budget system, for example, personal budget scheme. So I just wanted to add this to the conversation, supported decision making. Yeah.
Okay, I think I will hand this question directly to the panel because it's a very important one and we have not raised this topic so far. Yeah, it kind of concerns all panelists. For example, be curious, are you taking this into account, legal capacity supported decision making in the personal assistance reform?
In fact, we are also doing right now the personal autonomy bill, which basically will also take into account the legal capacity. So it's in parallel, it's happening right now.
Okay, so do they get supported decision making then to help with the personal assistance?
Till now,
Or-
no, but it's there.
Yeah. Do some of the other panelists want to come in, Christian, on legal capacity?
And I know that for mentally impaired people in Germany, when you have the need to have budget assistance to manage the budget itself, it's also a part of the Eingliederungshilfe, of the integration help. So one of the pillars, it is in this pillar. So you can get the personal budget for the budget management itself to get a person helping you doing decision making. But it depends on the assessment. So you have to go through an assessment, and it's like the legislation is nationwide, but the implementation is mainly on the municipal level. So it's kind of a postcode lottery as well. That's also a bit of a pain point.
Okay, thanks, Christian. Yeah, okay. Antonella?
Yeah, I wanted to thank because it's a very important point. And I also wanted to reply and say we really try to take this aspect into account in the survey and to not focus only on people with physical impairments, but all the disabled people. And for example, when under the pillar of political participation, we really have to assess if this right is actually equal for everyone, because in Europe, so many people with intellectual disabilities are under guardianship still cannot have the right to vote in elections or the right to run for elections. So I think it's really important when thinking about each pillar, legal capacity, employment, sexual and reproductive health and rights, to also consider the specific challenges persons with intellectual disabilities and women with intellectual disabilities face. So thank you.
I just maybe want to add that when we had the Minister of Social Affairs from Sweden, who decided at that time at our conference to close all the institutions in 2000, we asked him, well, how did he started to support the decision making? He said, to win the families, you are obliged to ensure that there is somebody present from the government, that the process is starting up and giving a guarantee of lifelong support. And it is something that now the governments forgot to do this. We speak a lot about supported decision making, so there are support groups, but there was nobody, a representative of the government who is there, and the legislation is embedding that supported decision making must be part of the support giving to a person, but that there is a guarantee of support lifelong with having somebody from the government watching over this process. So that is something that we need to take back our battles. And I was also wondering if within the second part of the strategy, we could not reach out to other stakeholders. Judges still needs to be trained. I know there was a lot of efforts from the Commission with the European Right Academy era, that they had a lot of trainings for judges on the CRPD. Maybe it's about time also now to skip to parts of the CRPD and go in deep to supported decision-making, access to justice. And also, yeah, we don't encourage people to litigate, but when it's needed to fix the gaps in the system, then it should be available. So I was just wondering, now that you're under DG Justice, that it could be very easy now to reach out to lawyers, to notaries, who has most of the time also that guardianship, and to raise awareness over there.
Yeah. If you want to. Yep, can you comment?
So, good point. So, I think the issue of supported decision making has been highlighted in the in the notice guidance. Indeed, as it was, as you said very eloquently, it's almost a precondition to exercise the rights to independent living. We are now that we are indeed in DG Justice, surrounded by lawyers. And we can think of reaching out some networks and ensure that somehow we discuss with the member states the laws on supported decision making, but also the practice, no, both the laws and the practice. And it's true that notaries also have a role to play in some instance. So we are, we will. I think it's an important issue for DG Justice. We have been working with colleagues while we were in DG Employment, but we'll continue to do so. So thanks for the highlighting this topic, which really is important and will be important in the second stage of the strategy. Thank you.
We also have some proposals in our input to the disability strategy, that we also need to find ways also to increase access to supported decision making, because it's not yet guaranteed in all member states. So there we did not raise this too much, wanted to raise this so much in our event today, but this is something where we also need to look for solutions. Okay, because it's already 4:05. I'm looking at the panelists. Should we close or take one more question, maybe from the online participants? How are you time-wise? Oh, okay. We are increasingly a bit short for time. Okay, then yeah, there are still a lot of questions online, but they're really a lot. So sorry to the online participants that we can't go through them all now. But I'm sure we will have more events, more opportunities to ask questions. Maybe we can find a way how to forward still the questions to the panelists. Let's see. Okay, then yeah, then I would say let us for now close this event. I thank all the speakers for the contributions and for the questions. I think it was a very helpful exchange. Yeah, I'm not a fan of long closing remarks, but maybe let us say that we really need to figure out which instruments to use, so it doesn't remain as words all the time. I mean, we had the child guarantee, we had the care strategy, we had council recommendations. So this might be an instrument we should really consider using, so that we then have a mandate to talk about this further and to engage. Okay, there, if you want, you can still join us for a cup of coffee and some networking. There's some coffee in the dark corner behind you. We'll switch some lights on. Can see the coffee. Okay, thank you very much. See you next time. Bye-bye.